So I did my intervention on self-monitoring. So some of the background on self-monitoring is that goal setting has been labeled as a foundational component in its self-regulation and behavior change, and stipulates the conditions necessary to attain personal success by prompting an individual to engage in self-monitoring and self-judgments of performance achievements. Another study was that Shunk in 1983 demonstrated that children who self-recorded, for example, self-monitored, engaged in 129% higher skill level and 65% more persistence with on-task behavior compared to students who do not self-record. Studies show that using self-monitoring for students' behaviors have shown a decrease in negative behaviors, a study by Winter in 2010. Research has indicated that with proper implementation of Goal 4 setting and self-monitoring within the classroom, students will display enhanced performance while correspondingly learning necessary skills such as on-task behavior to maintain desired academic behavior. It was found that self-monitoring can be successfully used with special education students of various ages in various settings to increase attention to task, positive behavior, classroom behaviors, and some social skills. It can also be successfully used to decrease inappropriate classroom behavior. For the method, the student that I worked with and did the self-monitoring intervention attends a K-5 elementary school in the Midwest. The school demographics are 85.7% white, 5.7% 2 or more races, and 3.4% Asian or Asian Pacific Islander, 3.2 Hispanic or Latino, 1.7 Black or African American, and 0.2% Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. The percentage of female students is 45, and then there's 55% male students. The reading proficiency is at 72%, and math proficiency is at 68%. The special education classroom that the student was in had 8 students. In his general education classroom, he had 27 students. The participant was one white male student in 2nd grade, age 8, with emotional and behavioral disorders, oppositional disorder, trauma, and ADHD. There was a paraprofessional who recorded the data and works with the student and a few others in the general education classroom. The dependent variable was academic engagement. The student attending to assigned tasks and following classroom rules and expectations as directed by the teacher. For the following are the examples: following teacher instructions and directions, working on the assigned task as expected, using materials appropriately, asking for teacher assistance as needed, interacting with adults and peers in a respectful manner, and staying focused on the academic content. Some non-examples would be wandering eyes, moving around the classroom without purpose or permission, and engaging in tasks other than one assigned focused on other students. The intervention / independent variables for self-monitoring intervention are multi-step metacognitive strategy that students become more aware of specific behavior and evaluate their mind's extent to which behavior occurred either at an instant in time or over a period of time, and then physically record it. Measured by reminders needed during each transition was the measure for baseline. So every time he needed a reminder, that was how we tallied or took down the data using a 0 through 2 point system. So based on how many reminders student needed to transition to the next task based on the safety, respect, and responsibility. Points were then added, and then percentages were found by taking the number of points earned divided by the number of points possible. Because some days he did not earn the same amount of points or have the same opportunity to earn the points, so we had to find the percentages each day for how many points he earned by dividing the points possible. The experimental design used was a single subject withdrawal ABA design. Intervention, the materials for it was a behavior contract, a point sheet for student to self-assess behavior, and for teacher to assess students' behaviors. Length of intervention session was about 1 hour and 30 minutes each morning. There was a student and para separately. The student and para would separately assess based on the following behaviors: being safe, being kind, and being responsible. The student will circle the corresponding number based on meeting the expectations. A 0 means he had 3 or more reminders. A 1 means he had 2 reminders. And a 2 meant that he had 0 to 1 reminders. Here's the graph with the results. So on the y-axis was the percentage of points earned. On the x-axis is the session numbers. As you can see, for baseline in the first intervention, his points were already pretty high and close to 100%, but as the intervention was implemented, his points increased slightly for the trend. Then when we went back to baseline, the points increased, and then stayed at a steady trend. And then once the intervention was implemented again, the data really didn't change. It went down a slight amount, but maintained. So for non-overlapping data, this is when you determine the range of the scores in the baseline by counting the number of data points in the adjacent intervention phase that do not overlap with the range of baseline scores. So you do this by dividing non-overlapping data points by the total number of data points in the intervention phase. Once you've calculated the overlapping data, if the treatment is very effective, then the percentage of the data would be 90% or greater. If the percentage is 70 to 89%, then it would be effective, and 60 to 69% would be questionable, and anything less than 50% is ineffective. We want to see a lack of overlap in the data points because the less that overlaps, that demonstrates more of a change in a student's behavior as a function of the intervention. So the scores that I got for the first phases 1 and 2 were 33%, which means the data was ineffective and would not show that the intervention made a difference in behavior. And for phase 3 to 4, the data points for points of non-overlapping data was 50%, which also showed that the data was ineffective and showing that my scores had a weak effect, and I would not feel confident that the intervention really affected the behavior. For the mean, this is when you find the average of the sum of the scores, then divide by the amount of numbers in the data set for means for intervention, baseline, intervention, so for the first mean for phase 1, the mean was 76, and then the standard deviation was 11.9. So standard deviation is how dispersed the data is in relation to the mean, so how far each score lies from the mean. In the second mean for phase 2 was 82, and then the standard deviation was 5.56. The mean for phase 3 was 95, the standard deviation was 4.92. The mean for phase 4 was 88, and then the standard deviation was 4.43. The trend for the graph showed an increase from phase 1 to phase 2. The trend from phase 3 to phase 4 was flat. Again, the percent of non-overlap was for phase 1 through 2 is 33%, which was ineffective, and phase 3 to 4 was 50%, which also was ineffective. The ranges for each phase would show the lowest score to the highest score, and then finding the difference of that. So for range of phase 1 was 58 to 83, so you subtract those two to get 25 for the range. Range 2 would be 75 to 90, which would equal to 15. Range 3 was from 86 to 100, which would equal 14. And range 4 would be 83 to 93, which would equal 10. The immediacy of the data in phase 1 to phase 2 showed a positive increase from 58% of points earned to 75% points earned. The immediacy for phase 3 to phase 4 was a decrease in positive behavior from 97 to 89%. The discussion is the purpose of this study was to provide information and data supporting the self-monitoring intervention and an increase of positive behaviors in an elementary classroom setting with a student diagnosed with emotional behavior disorder. The participant increased positive behavioral skills in the classroom after the baseline was collected and the intervention feedback began. Once the participant was used to the intervention in place, the results Once the participant used the intervention and it was in place, the results with and without feedback were still higher than an original baseline collected before feedback was implemented. Previous research had shown that there is limited research investigating the connection between a student's emotional state to the student's observable behavior and academic engagement. Teachers need to collect data on emotion regulation, on task engagement, and academic performance to better provide interventions within classroom settings. A limitation of this study was whether or not the participant truly cared about what the teacher ranked him throughout the times compared to what he gave himself. A second limitation was how this intervention would interrupt him during work and transition times, which were already tough for him. Future studies may want to find a way to collect data in a less distracting way for younger students. Additionally, having a parent involvement of the scores to discuss with the participant how he or she is doing may increase the student's honesty and care about how he or she scores themselves. And here's my reference page. And that concludes my self-monitoring intervention presentation.